Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this fine Monday. We have a lot to talk about on today's show, as we normally do. But before I get into that, I just want to remind you guys to donate or tip and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show. And once again, for bonus coverage materials that are not covered by this live broadcast, make sure to go to patreon.com and search up GSMC Sports Network. And that is where you can find all the exclusive content for the podcast that I do, the football podcast and the baseball podcast, and of course the college football, basketball, and fantasy football podcasts as well. So, like I said, got a lot to talk about today, of course. And, you know, just to double check, I do have sound, because I know last week when I did the double show, I did not realize that I didn't have sound. So I was basically talking on mute for pretty much the whole first half of the football podcast. And then by the time I realized that, it was like, I shouldn't say it was too late, because then I went back and redid it, but it was just... It was a mess on Friday, but we were able to get through it and, made sure that everything was right before I went on, so that's good. And, so let's get right into what we're going to talk about. So in the first part of the show, as you can see on the bottom, we're going to talk about the 49ers and the Eagles both losing yesterday. Both teams were favored in their games, and they both ended up taking their first losses of the season, so now there is no more undefeated teams left in the NFL. So that'll be the first topic of today's show. Then in the next two parts of the show, we'll talk about the early window games, the second part of the show, and then in the third part of the show, we'll talk about the late window games, and especially we'll get into the Sunday night game, because that game actually was competitive, believe it or not. And then we will get into, for the final part of the show, we'll preview tonight's game between the Cowboys and the Chargers. So that's the rundown for today's show. So let's get right into the first part of the show, which is talking about the 49ers and the Eagles both losing and dropping to 5-1 respectively. And now there's no more undefeated teams. So going into these games yesterday, the 49ers, when I went off the air on Friday, they were a 10-point favorite over the Browns. And that was because Deshaun Watson wasn't playing, and P.J. Walker was going to end up getting the start. And the 49ers, I mean, coming off of a 42-10 win over the Cowboys, I mean, it looked like they were going to roll over the Browns and get an easy win. But that was not the case. They actually got into a little bit of a skirmish in the before the game started. Elijah Moore was starting with some of the players on the Niners, so both teams were, getting into fights before the game, so that had to be broken up. Deebo Samuel was and Trent Williams were for the 49ers players that were highlighted in that in those fights in the beginning before the game started. So then the game starts. 49ers go right down the field, and they score a touchdown. 5 plays, 84 yards in under 3 minutes. Christian McCaffrey scores yet another touchdown. So, yeah, they go up 7-0. And then the Browns get the ball back. Oh, well, they get the ball on their first drive, and P.J. Walker throws a pick to Fred Warner. Then the Niners end up missing a field goal. The Browns, they end up missing a field goal on their next possession. 49ers punted. Browns punted. So that's how the first quarter went. Then Niners got a field goal to go up 10-0 in the second quarter. And the Browns, they went 5 plays, 83 yards. And they got a touchdown of their own, so they were down 10-7. P.J. Walker threw a 58-yard pass to Amari Cooper, and that was a great catch. And that led to a direct snap to Kareem Hunt, who scored a touchdown from 16 yards out. So that ended up being the Browns' first touchdown of the game. They made the extra point. And then the Niners punted again. Browns punted again. That's how the first half went. Browns, they opened up the second half. 9 plays, 48 yards. They ended up getting a field goal. So that tied the game. Brock Purdy ended up throwing an interception, but that didn't lead to anything. Both teams punted. Browns, they kicked the field goal. So they were up 13-10 going into the fourth quarter. Then both teams punted their first 2 possessions of the fourth quarter. And then Browns threw P.J. Walker threw a pick. Niners, they got a touchdown. That was late in the game, too. Niners ended up getting a touchdown with Jordan Mason, and we'll explain why in a little bit, why he was in the game. Then the Browns kicked a field goal. Niners punted. And then the Browns, they took another drive, 9 plays, 63 yards. A minute and 16 that drive took. And, they were up 19-17. Then Brock Purdy, 9 plays, 52 yards, got them into field goal range. And the Niners missed the field goal there. And they ended up losing 19-17. So, yeah, it was a rough game for Brock Purdy. He went 12 of 27, 125 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He was sacked 3 times. Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel both were ruled out of this game. Christian McCaffrey is dealing with an oblique and a rib injury, so he's got a pair of injuries. And then I think Deebo Samuel, I want to say he's dealing with I think it's a shoulder injury, I want to say. He's going to be undergoing more tests on his shoulder. So the 49ers, they lost 2 key pieces in this game. I mean, Christian McCaffrey has been one of the best non-quarterback players in the NFL so far this year. Outside of his touchdown, which was a receiving touchdown, on the ground they didn't really do much, the Niners. Like I said, Jordan Mason, he had to run the ball. He did have a touchdown in the game. George Kittle only had 1 reception for 1 yard. He really didn't do anything in this game. Ayuk was actually their leading receiver. He had 4 receptions for 76 yards. On the Browns side, P.J. Walker really didn't do good. He had 2 picks in this game. He passed for under 200 yards. But, the Browns, they did run the ball well. Ran for 160 yards. Jerome Ford had 84 yards on the ground. Kareem Hunt had the touchdown. He had 47 yards rushing. Amari Cooper had a good game, 4 receptions for 108 yards. But I think the big story in this game really is the Browns' defense. The Browns' defense was great. They forced Brock Purdy to turn the ball over. They put a lot of pressure on him. And, they get a huge win, and that's with P.J. Walker starting at quarterback against a team that really everybody was looking at as being, above and beyond like the favorites right now. And that was actually Brock Purdy's first regular season loss. So give the Browns respect. The defense really showed up. Jim Schwartz has done an excellent job as a defensive coordinator for the Browns. So, they forced a turnover. And, also I think the other thing, too, is not having McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel, changed the complexion of the whole game, really. But, again, that's not to discredit the Browns' defense. They really played well. That defense is very good. And listen, now with McCaffrey and Deebo maybe missing some time, people still talk about Brock Purdy maybe being a system quarterback. Let's see what he's really made of now when he doesn't have Christian McCaffrey out there, which is a security blanket, and Deebo. You still got Ayuk and you still got George Kittle, but, that's half of your big playmakers. So we'll see what happens, but, that was not a good performance by the Niners offense. They take their first loss. So now let's get into the second game, which is talking about the Eagles now. So they ended up losing to the Jets 20-14. Jalen Hurts, 3 interceptions in this game, and the Eagles as a team had 4 turnovers. I think DeAndre Swift was the one who fumbled in the game. I think he was responsible for he was. So 4 turnovers in the game for the Eagles. Jets, they improved to 3-3 on the season. Listen, I thought that, especially with the Jets defense being out without their two top corners, no DJ Reed, no more Sauce Gardner, I thought the Eagles were going to pick apart this defense. But that was not the case. I mean, in the first quarter, they had the ball for almost 10 minutes, 19-play drive, 83 yards to go up 7-0. Jets get a field goal. Then the Eagles, Jalen Hurts to DeAndre Swift in the second quarter to put them up 14-3. And that was the last time the Eagles scored. The Jets held them scoreless. I think it was for their final 7 drives of the game, whatever it was. But yeah, Zerline kicked a couple of field goals. So it was 14-9 at the half. Then the Jets got a field goal in the third quarter. So it was 14-12. And late in the game, on third down, the Eagles drop back to throw it. And Hurts throws a pick. Hurts throws an interception. Threw it to Adams on the Jets, who brings it all the way back, 45 yards. And then on the next play, Breece Hall takes it up the middle, 8 yards for a touchdown. They also got the 2-point conversion. Zach Wilson threw it to Randall Cobb. And then the Eagles, they couldn't do anything. And the Jets kneeled it down, and that was it. Jets end up winning the game, and the Eagles dropped to 5-1. And yeah, Jalen Hurts 3 picks. He didn't have a good game either. So, and you know what? Again, got to give credit where credit is due to the Jets defense, because without their top 2 corners, they forced 4 turnovers in this game. The offense really wasn't getting anything going. But that interception set up the touchdown to put them ahead. And the Jets, they improved to 3-3 heading into the bye week. And listen, after the Broncos win last week, the Jet fans, some of them were like, hey, maybe, playoffs. It could be it. Beating one of the worst teams in football. But now you go out and you beat one of the best teams in football. You give them their first loss of the season, and this is without your top 2 corners. Listen, the Jets defense, and especially at home too, they forced Josh Allen to throw 3 interceptions. Mahomes threw 3 interceptions, and now Jalen Hurts threw 3 interceptions. And listen, they could have beat the Chiefs. This Jets defense is really good. And it really makes you wonder, what would have happened if Rodgers didn't get hurt? Now, we did see him. He was throwing passes on the field. No crutches, nothing, before the game. So, I still think he's not coming back this year. I think he's definitely coming back next year. But if this guy somehow plays this year and the Jets make the playoffs, that would just be incredible. But I would be very, very scared for him, because I just am afraid he's going to get hurt if he ends up playing this year. But, listen, it is no crutches, no walking boot. Who knows? Who knows? But Jets pick up a huge win. Eagles, they end up taking a tough loss there. That was rough. The offense just didn't play well. Hurts did not have a good game. Both teams, 49ers and Eagles, did not have good games. And that just goes to show you any given Sunday, really. You got P.J. Walker starting for the Browns, and they still ended up winning that game. And then you got the Jets with their quarterback issues. Zach Wilson has looked a little bit better, but still, he's not the answer for them. The defenses really carried those teams to victory yesterday against both of these teams who have, some of the best offenses in the league. So that was big. Those were big wins for both teams, because both teams are, fighting for wild card spots, in the AFC. And the Browns, it's possible they can win the division. I still don't think the Jets don't really have a chance with that, but listen, I think the Jets, with their good defense, they could be a playoff team, and they've showed that, especially at home, that they could play some of these good quarterbacks. These are some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts. These are the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL. Big win for both of those teams. And, with the Eagles, next week they play the Dolphins, so it doesn't get any easier, but it's at home. And then for the Niners, I mean, listen, who knows how long McCaffrey and Debo, if they're going to miss some time. I mean, I think McCaffrey might because he's got 2 injuries he's dealing with. But we'll see what happens with Debo. Like I said, he's going to be undergoing more tests. So with that, we are going to take our first break of the show. And then when we come back, I will recap all of the rest of the early window games from yesterday. So stick around, and we will be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we're going to recap the rest of the early window games from yesterday. So we'll start off with the game in London. So we had the Ravens and the Titans. Obviously, these two teams have played each other a lot over the course of the last few years, especially in the postseason. The Titans winning that game in Baltimore in 2019, Lamar Jackson's MVP season. And then, of course, in 2020, the Ravens in Tennessee defeated the Titans there. So now these teams play each other in London. Obviously, some players from those games are no longer with the team. So Ravens end up picking up the win, 24-16. They were up 18-3 going into half, and actually the Titans made things interesting towards the end. But the Ravens were able to hold on and win by 8. Ryan Tannehill actually left this game with an injury, got carted off. So Malik Willis came into the game, it didn't really lead to anything. The Titans still ended up losing. Looking at the numbers, so Lamar Jackson, he went 21-30, 223 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. The Ravens ran the ball for 139 yards. Lamar was their leading rusher with 62. Gus Edwards had 41, and Justice Hill had 35. Mark Andrews, he was their leading receiver. He had 69 yards receiving. Zay Flowers, who's had a good season for the Ravens, 50 yards receiving and a touchdown. That's like the major stats when it comes to the Ravens. Tannehill and Malik Willis. Tannehill threw for 76 yards and an interception, no touchdowns, and Malik Willis threw for 74 yards. He went 4 for 5. Derrick Henry actually had a good game. He had a 63-yard run in this game and a touchdown. 97 yards in total for him. Tajay Spears actually ended up being their leading receiver because he had the late reception in the game that set up another score for the Titans. It was a 48-yard reception. DeAndre Hopkins only had 1 reception for 20 yards. So he had a good game last week. This week he really didn't do anything. The Ravens improved to 4-2. Titans, they dropped to 2-4 on the season. Yeah, the Titans, they're a team that looks like they're going nowhere. They might have to go into a rebuild because Tannehill, he just, the first couple years with the Titans, he looked good, but now I think they need to move in a different direction at quarterback. Derrick Henry's obviously getting older. They have DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, those guys, should end up on new teams next year, or maybe this year if the Titans decide to trade him. But we'll see. But yeah, Titans dropped to 2-4, Ravens 4-2. So we go into now Washington and Atlanta. Desmond Ridder has not lost a game at home, but that ended up not being the case yesterday. He did end up losing. Washington gets back on track. They improved to 3-3. Falcons dropped to 3-3. They end up winning 24-16. Sam Howell had 3 touchdowns to no interceptions. Terry McLaurin had a good game, 81 yards receiving. Curtis Samuel continues to be productive. He had another touchdown. Brian Robinson Jr., he also had a receiving touchdown in this game, as well as Antonio Gibson. And Desmond Ridder had a rough game. Passed for over 300 yards, but threw 3 interceptions in this game. And, Drake London ended up having a very good game, 9 receptions for 125 yards. But, the Falcons, like I said, I don't really think they're a team that's going anywhere this year. they've been competitive, but I think Desmond Ridder is not the answer at quarterback. So Falcons drop to 3-3. Washington improves to 3-3, and they will be playing the Giants next week. Then we go into the Vikings and the Bears. Obviously, the Vikings are without Justin Jefferson in this game. He's placed on IR with the hamstring injury, and the Bears coming off of a big win against Washington. I mean, DJ Moore had his monster game. Fields looked good. So, the Vikings, they kind of own the Bears. But I thought this time around it was going to be different. But, the Vikings, although they didn't really play great, they ended up winning 19-13. And also because Justin Fields ended up leaving the game, dislocated one of his fingers. He left with a hand injury, but that was why he left. But he was not good in this game before he left. He was 6 for 10, 58 yards, and a touchdown. So they had to put in Tyson Bagent at quarterback, their undrafted rookie, and he went 10 for 14, 83 yards. He also threw a pick. Bears actually ran the ball for 162 yards. Their leading receiver was once again DJ Moore. He had 51 yards receiving. No passing touchdowns in this game. Bagent actually ended up having their rushing touchdown. So, but Bears just, again, go backwards here after looking good last week. Kirk Cousins was, he was okay, 21-30, 181 yards and a touchdown. They really didn't run the ball. Madison was their leading receiver with 44 yards rushing, and the leading receiver was TJ Hawkinson, 50 yards receiving. Jordan Addison had their only offensive touchdown in this game. That was a 15-yard reception, I believe. So, and actually the Vikings had a defensive touchdown in this game. They got a fumble recovery, and they ran that back. So that put them up 19-6, and then the Bears had the touchdown. So 19-13. Fields, I don't know what his status is going to be. We'll know as we progress through the week. But, so the Vikings improved to 2-4. Bears dropped to 1-5. We'll see what happens now with Fields and his injury. So now we move on to the Bengals and the Seahawks. This one was actually a good game, but it was low scoring. Bengals ended up winning 17-13 over the Seahawks. Geno Smith kind of had a rough game. He did pass for over 300 yards, but he did have a couple of interceptions. Kenneth Walker had 62 yards rushing and a touchdown. Tyler Lockett was the leading receiver with 94 yards. Bengals, Joe Burrow had a pick. He had 2 touchdowns. He passed for 185 yards. Bengals really couldn't run the ball yesterday. They only ran for 46 yards in total. Joe Mixon was their leading rusher. He had 38 yards rushing, but they just couldn't get anything going on the ground. Jamar Chase, 80 yards receiving. He was their leading receiver. Tyler Boyd had a touchdown in this game. He had 38 yards receiving. Not a lot of scoring in this game. It's kind of a defensive battle, defensive struggle. The Seahawks had their opportunities at the end. They could have won this game, but they just they couldn't get into the end zone, and they ended up losing that. So the Bengals, they improved to 3-3. Seahawks dropped to 3-2 on the season. Then we move on to the Texans and the Saints. Texans taking that 20-13. So C.J. Stroud continues to play well. Although this game was kind of rough for him. 13. He only completed 13 passes, 13 for 27 in this game, 199 yards passing, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Devin Singletary was their leading rusher. Nico Collins was their leading receiver. C.J. Stroud continues to gain better chemistry with Dalton Schultz. He had another touchdown in this game. He went 4 for 61 in this game. So, Dalton Schultz, a guy they got over from Dallas. So, he continues to have a good couple weeks for the Texans. So, they improved to 3-3. The Saints dropped to 3-3. They play on Thursday. Derek Carr passed for over 350 yards, but he had a touchdown and a pick. Kamara was their leading rusher with 68 yards, and Olave was their leading receiver with 96 yards. Rashid Shaheed, he had a touchdown in this game. He had 2 receptions for 85 yards. But the Saints, they do not look good offensively. They and you would think, like, with the playmakers on offense, they would be able to, with having the upgraded quarterback with Derek Carr, that this team would be improved. And offensively, they just don't look good. The defense is shaky. So, yeah, I mean, listen, they play in a bad division. I mean, this division's still, we'll get into, the Bucks game in the Bucks Lions game in the next segment, but I mean, this division still is still winnable, but they just do not look good offensively. So yeah, and then we got two more games, so we'll run through them quickly. Jaguars, they win another game. Dominated the Colts 37-20. Gardner Minshew's revenge game. It didn't really go that well. He threw 3 interceptions and had a touchdown in this game. They couldn't run the ball. Only ran the ball for 44 yards, but that's also because they were down by a lot. Michael Pittman was their leading receiver. Had 9 receptions for 109 yards in this game. But yeah, they really and Minshew threw the ball 55 times. So they were down by a lot in this game early. They were down 21-6 going into the half, and then they were down 31-6 going into the fourth quarter. So, yeah, but they did put up 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, but yeah, it just wasn't enough. 37-20 was the final score. So final game, actually was interesting at one point. Dolphins and Panthers. Panthers actually were up 14-0 at the end of the first quarter, but the Dolphins then outscored them 42-7 the rest of the way. So I mean, you kind of figured the Dolphins were going to come back, but it was just interesting how the first quarter unfolded. Bryce Young, 217 yards passing and a touchdown. Chuba Hubbard was their leading rusher. He had 88 yards rushing and a touchdown. Adam Thielen continues to have a really good season for them. 11 receptions for 115 yards and a touchdown. So him and Bryce Young have nice chemistry. So it really is kind of crazy how Thielen just has bounced back going to a new team. I mean, he's looked awesome so far this year. And then over on the Dolphins side of things, Tua Tagovailoa, 262 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Raheem Mostert was their leading rusher, 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. And, of course, Tyreek Hill was their leading receiver. 6 receptions for 163 yards and a touchdown. He had that long touchdown reception that put them up 21-14. That was for 41 yards. And, so the Dolphins, they continue to roll. After the bad loss to the Bills, they won last week. They won this week. And now they got a big game on Sunday night against the Eagles, so that's gonna be a big game to highlight, during the week. So, but yeah, that's all the early slate of games. Honestly, I mean the slate for this week just really wasn't that good. There really was not a lot of good games. There was a lot of surprises. I will say that. But yeah, the slate was kind of a lackluster this week, so hopefully next week is better. But yeah, I mean, obviously, and we went over the Niners-Browns game, upset in that game. I thought for a minute, I'm like, are the Panthers really going to beat the Dolphins? But that ended up not happening. The Dolphins ended up dominating. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. Talking about the early slate of games. Let me know what you guys think. When talking about that, how do you think the games went? In your opinion, let me know in the comments section. So with that, we are going to take our second break of the show. And then when we come back, we will continue our discussion with Week 6. And we will talk about the late window game. So that's also including the Sunday night game, which actually turned out, I mean, same result. Didn't expect, one thing to happen. But still, how the game unfolded was very interesting. And we will get into that when we come back from our second break. So stick around, and we will be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we are now going to recap the late window games, and I'll give you my thoughts on that. But once again, I want to remind you guys to donate or tip and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show. And for bonus coverage materials that are not covered by this broadcast, make sure to go to patreon.com and search up GSMC Sports Network. And that is where you can find all the exclusive content from all of our podcasts here on the GSMC Sports Network. So now let's get into the late window of games, moving right along. So we'll start off actually with the game that I highlighted last week, and that was the Browns and the Lions. You know, the Bucs and the Lions. Sorry. So obviously going into this game, both teams are in first place. Baker Mayfield was having a good season. And the Lions, of course, they've been rolling offensively, and the defense has been coming along. But, I thought, hey, this game could be a competitive game. It could be close. I would say that both defenses played, well in this game. Because, the final score ended up being 20-6. The Lions just, I keep saying the Browns. The Bucs offense just really couldn't get anything going offensively. Jared Goff had a very good game. 353 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. But yeah, the Bucs were good against the run. Like when I was previewing the game last week, the Lions only ran for 40 yards. Their leading rusher was actually Craig Reynolds, who actually had to be who had to run the ball because David Montgomery left with an injury. So they only ran for 40 yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he made his return. And he didn't miss a beat. 12 receptions for 124 yards and a touchdown in this game. He got a great block to score that. I think it was the 27-yard touchdown. So that put the Lions up 10-3. And Jameson Williams also had a touchdown in this game. 2 receptions for 53 yards. And it was that 45-yard touchdown. Josh Reynolds, 50 yards receiving. Laporta, 36 yards receiving. Yeah, so Jared Goff really spread the ball around in this game. He looked good. But, they only won by 2 scores. They only put up 20 points. So the Bucs defense, tried to keep it, as close to best they could. But the Bucs offense just really couldn't get anything going. Baker Mayfield went 19-37, 206 yards, no touchdowns and a pick. Bucs are not a good running team. They only ran for 46 yards. Rashad White was their leading rusher. Chris Godwin was their leading receiver, had 77 yards receiving. Mike Evans had 49. Bucs offensively just couldn't get anything going. So you know what that game showed me is listen. The Lions, they are the third best team in the NFC right now. But you know what? Based off of what happened yesterday, anything can happen. They could definitely, although it's going to be very tough, they could definitely beat the Eagles and the Niners because they have such a good offense. The defense continues to improve. If you force Jalen Hurts into turnovers, the Jets showed you what you got to do against them. So, and then for the Niners, obviously it's a lot different when they don't have McCaffrey and Debo moving forward. But listen, the Lions continue to improve. 5-1 now. Like I said, the defense is looking good. Anything's possible. But for me, the Bucs, they could win the South, but I don't really expect them or anybody from the South to do anything when they make the playoffs because it's just not a good division. And the Bucs against the Eagles and the Lions, they just they haven't looked good. Although they did look good against the Saints, but how have the Saints looked? So yeah, that game kind of showed me a lot. In terms of the Bucs. And listen, still a long season. They got a lot of winnable games, like I said, but against these better teams, they have not delivered. So, So 20-6, Lions improved to 5-1, and they're actually tied now with the Eagles and the Niners now. So hey, listen, one of those teams slips up again, Lions could pass them, and hey, maybe they end up with the 1 seed somehow. But again, we're still ways away from that. But it's something to something to keep an eye on. So we move on now. Let's get into the Rams and the Cardinals. So the Rams, it was close for a little bit. Actually, the Cardinals were winning at the half, but then the Rams shut them out in the second half, 20-0. They end up winning 26-9. Stafford, 15-24, 226 yards and a touchdown. Karen Williams had a great game, 20 carries for 158 yards and a touchdown. Cooper Kupp had a great game, 7 receptions for 148 yards and a touchdown, so he hasn't skipped a beat after missing some time to start the year. And the Cardinals, Josh Dobbs, 21-41, 235 yards and a touchdown. They ran the ball for 130 yards. Dobbs had 47 yards rushing. Ingram had 40. Williams had 36. DeMarcado had 11. Their leading receiver was their tight end, Trey McBride, for 62 yards. And Michael Wilson had 62 yards receiving as well. But yeah, Rams improved to 3-3. Cardinals 1-5. But it was kind of a little bit of an ugly win for. I mean, the Rams they were great in the second half, but it didn't look good for a little bit. I think this team could still be a wild card team. They got the Steelers, the Cowboys, at the Packers. So, I mean, all the games they have left on their schedule are winnable. But, I still think they're going to be a team that might be maybe get to 9 wins. That might get you in, but I don't know. They still look, they don't really look that good to me. I mean, they ran the ball well. Cooper Kupp looks great. But, I still have my concerns with this team moving forward. But, they got talent on the team, of course, but, still not great as of right now. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. So then we get into the Patriots and the Raiders. Patriots dropped to 1-5. Raiders get to 3-3. Jimmy Garoppolo actually went to the hospital with a back injury, so Brian Hoyer was playing in this game. The Patriots, they kept it close, but again, they just couldn't get the job done. Mac Jones, another bad game, 24-33, 200 yards, no touchdowns and a pick. They ran the ball for 83 yards. They actually got – so Ezekiel Elliott, I think, had a 74-yard touchdown, and it was called back. So that just goes to show you how it's going for the Patriots. Ramondre Stevenson and Zeke both had touchdowns. Well, Zeke ended up with the touchdown, but yeah, they both had touchdowns. Their leading receiver was Kendrick Bourne, 10 receptions for 89 yards. But yeah, really no other production. Gesicki had 28, Stevenson had 24. They just really, again, look a mess offensively. And Jimmy Garoppolo, 14-22, 162 yards, a touchdown and a pick, and yeah, he left the game and had to go to the hospital, the back injury, so I don't know what his status is going to be moving forward. We'll talk about it later in the week. And then, of course, you have Brian Hoyer, who had to come in the game, 6-10, 102 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Josh Jacobs, 25 carries, 77 yards in this game. And then, actually, their leading receiver was their rookie tight end, Michael Mayer. He had 5 receptions for 75 yards, so they continue to try to get him more involved in the offense. Jacoby Myers continues to have a good season, 5 receptions for 61 yards and a touchdown. Tucker had 2 receptions for 57 yards. And Devontae Adams, only 2 receptions for 29 yards. I mean, I know he's dealing with an injury, but, I mean, he's just been a non-factor these last couple of games. So, is it a mix with injury? I honestly, for me, I hope Devontae goes somewhere else where, a team actually uses him. And also because the Raiders, I mean, listen, they're 3-3, but, the quarterback situation is a mess right now. So, but yeah, Patriots dropped to 1-5. Raiders are 3-3, and they got the Bears next, so they can get themselves back to over 500, even without Jimmy Garoppolo. So, we'll see what happens. And then as for the Patriots, next week they play the Bills. So, and then they play the Dolphins after that. So, it's not looking good right now in New England. So now let's get into, for the last 6 minutes here of this segment, let's talk about the Bills and the Giants. So I said the Giants had no shot at winning this game. I didn't see a scenario in which they were going to win this game. But they actually were winning this game at one point, believe it or not. They were up 6-0 going into the half. They forced some turnovers. Gabe Davis fumbled. Josh Allen threw an interception. So, it was looking good for a little bit. Even though, like, that entire time, I still was like, there's no chance the Giants win this game. There is literally no chance. Now, they got the ball again, driving. They were down in the red zone. And they were at the 1-yard line with 14 seconds left. And for some reason, there was miscommunication between Dable and Tyrod Taylor, who actually did not play that bad in this game, although, again, the Giants only put up 9 points. The Giants could have just, passed at least 3. You had enough time to just, throw a couple balls in the end zone and not get anything, and then, hey, kick the field goal. But what ended up happening was, I guess Tyrod audibled, so they ran the ball, and they weren't able to clock it in time to kick a field goal, and the Giants went into the half 6-0, and at that point I said the Giants are definitely not winning this game now, because that's going to come back to bite them. And sure enough, the Bills, they outscored the Giants 14-3 in the fourth quarter. So the Bills didn't even score till the fourth quarter. Josh Allen really didn't. In the fourth quarter he played well. 169 yards passing, 2 touchdowns and a pick. They ran the ball for 128 yards. James Cook had 71. Latavius Murray had 45. Scary situation in the game. Damian Harris actually got put on the stretcher, taken to the hospital with an injury. And, scary situation there. And obviously, the Bills, they dealt with a similar situation last year with only the difference is Damian Harris was, gave the thumbs up. What happened last year with DeMar Hamlin, he was unresponsive. But they, obviously were able to, revive him, and everything's okay now. And he was emotional on the sidelines because he was inactive for this game. But that was a scary situation there. But, Damian Harris gave the thumbs up, and that's, always a great sign. Scary situation there. And then going back to the, the stats of the game. So Diggs ended up having a good game, of course, 10 receptions for 100 yards. I thought he would have got 200. But the Giants defense actually played well in this game. And then obviously the big controversy was at the end of the game. The Giants were driving, they got the ball back, and they were driving down the field. And, they get to the end zone, and there was a flag, so that set the Giants up. But they couldn't get the ball in the end zone. Well, no, they actually, ended up playing an untimed down. So they got the ball at the 1, and, Taylor threw it up top to Waller, and they didn't call pass interference or holding, nothing. And the player on the Bills was not looking. Grabbed Waller's jersey, was grabbing his arm, and refs didn't call it. And that was how the game ended. So, with the NFL, when stuff like that happens, and especially on national TV when everybody sees it, it's not a good look. It's not. And that's why when you have people saying that, there's some influence on these games, that's the reason why. And you had the back judge who was right there, who saw the play and did not throw the flag. Now, for me, the reason why the Giants didn't win this game is because of what happened in the first half. You should have kicked the field goal, went up 9-0, and that drive would have been to kick the game-winning field goal to win 15-14. But that wasn't the case. So that, to me, was a typical Giants loss. You play competitive against a superior opponent who should blow you out. You're winning the game at one point. Then that opponent comes back, beats you, and it's because of a boneheaded mistake that you made earlier in the game that ends up being the difference in the game. Now, of course, the Giants got to put up more than 9 points, but yeah, that ended up being the difference in the game. I knew it because last year was an anomaly. This year, the Giants are showing who they are. What they are is not a good football team. Then you had them fighting with the Bills the whole night. You had Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams and Kayvon Thibodeau getting in it with the some of the offensive guys on the Bills. The team is a mess right now, and they're 1-5. And the scary thing is Tyrod Taylor actually other than how Daniel Jones played in the second half against the Cardinals, Tyrod Taylor really didn't do bad operating the offense. He did a better job than Daniel Jones has. The Giants didn't turn the ball over in this game. He only passed for 200 yards, but there was no turnovers in this game for the Giants. Saquon Barkley actually, he was okay last night. He got a lot of carries, 24 carries for 93 yards, had a couple of big runs in this game. Their leading receiver was Darius Slayton. Wan'Dale Robinson didn't have a bad game. He had 62 yards receiving. Waller had 43. The Giants are just not a very good team. Daniel Jones is not the answer at quarterback. He's just not. And again, it's hard to evaluate when the team's not very good, but I thought the offensive line did a good job last night protecting Tyrod. He didn't get killed like I thought he was going to. So, but yeah, Giants lose, Bills win. They improved to 4-2, and the Giants drop to 1-5, and they play Washington next week. So we'll see what happens. Tyrod continues to play, or if Daniel Jones comes back. So we'll see what happens there. But with that, we're going to take our final break of the show. And then when we come back, we are going to discuss the last game of Week 6, and that is between the Cowboys and the Chargers, as the Cowboys try to get back on track from that rough loss against the 49ers last week. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are now going to preview tonight's game between the Cowboys and the Chargers. So currently the Cowboys are 3-2 on the season. The Chargers, coming off of a bye week, they are 2-2. Looking at the player stats. So Dak Prescott, he has 1,061 yards passing, 5 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Justin Herbert has 1,100 yards passing. 7 touchdowns to 1 interception. So the touchdown to interception ratio definitely is vastly different between these two quarterbacks. Tony Pollard, he's their leading rusher this year, 340 yards, rushing and 2 touchdowns. Right now, Joshua Kelly is the leading rusher for the Chargers, but Austin Eckler is playing tonight, so that's huge, getting him back. And then obviously on the receiving side of things, CeeDee Lamb, 358 yards receiving and a touchdown. Keenan Allen also having a good season, 434 yards, 3 touchdowns. So, yeah, both receivers look good. Although CeeDee Lamb, you'd like to see him get the ball more. That's something that has been a problem this year. He is their best receiver, and they got to get him involved more. Keenan Allen, obviously, with Mike Williams being out, his targets are only going to go up. Although now you have Eckler back in, so that might dent his targets just a little bit. But looking at the league rankings, so the Chargers, they're second in passing yards this year, 288.8 yards per game, and then the Cowboys are 19th, 217.8. Rushing yards, the Cowboys are 8, averaging 124.4 rushing yards. And the Chargers are actually 10th, averaging 119.8. And then both offenses are high scoring. You have the Chargers are 5th, the Cowboys are 6th. Chargers are averaging 27.5, and the Cowboys are averaging 26.8. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Cowboys are 2nd in passing yards. Chargers are 32nd when it comes to passing yards. So it's a vast difference between the defenses there. Chargers. This is a key stat here. The Chargers' defense is actually good against the run, and the Cowboys' defense really hasn't been. They're 22nd. The Chargers are kind of middle of the pack. They're 15th. But yeah, that's where the Chargers' defense has been better than the Cowboys, at least. And then in points allowed, Cowboys are 7th. Chargers' defense is 25th. So I had the Cowboys winning this game. I don't really trust the Chargers, although I don't really trust the Cowboys either. These two teams played each other a couple years ago. Herbert's second year, and the Cowboys were able to win that game. I remember that. I think the Cowboys are slightly the better team overall, although I think I would take the Chargers offense, and of course Justin Herbert I would take over Dak Prescott over the Cowboys. But they are getting Eckler back, so that's huge. But I think the Cowboys should win this game. I think if Dak Prescott has another rough game, then that's only just going to add more question marks to them because he really hasn't been that great. But I don't really trust the Chargers. The defense really hasn't been good this year. The Cowboys defense, last week just got absolutely shredded. I think this is although the Chargers are coming off of a bye week, I think the Cowboys get right here and they should win this game. They should be, but they got to open up this offense. Dak Prescott's got to, get the ball to CeeDee Lamb. But the other thing too is he cannot throw the ball to the other team. Like that just cannot happen this week or tonight. I almost said next week. I almost said this week, tonight. This is it. For this week. But I think this game's going to be close. I picked the Cowboys. I think they should win a close game here. It should be high scoring. Because Justin Herbert, I just told you. He's gotten off to a great start. He really has. And the other thing, too, is this is actually a Kellen Moore revenge game here, the old offensive coordinator for the Cowboys. So, but I think the Cowboys should win. But we'll just have to see what happens here. In general, I had a rough week with the picks. My spread pool, I forgot to because I don't do what some people do is if they're in more than one spread pool, at least my parents were doing it where they'd pick different teams for both of them. I try to do the same because, then it's like you're going to do bad in one and good in the other. Well, I ended up forgetting to switch one of the games, and that was Seattle and the Bengals. So I ended up having Seattle in one of them and the Bengals in the other. So I ended up finishing with 4 wins in one and 3 in the other. It was a rough week. It was a very rough week. And this is the first week, of me doing this podcast, and that's against the spread. I did very bad when it came to the spreads. So, it's back to the drawing board. So hopefully, I at this point, I really, don't care who wins. If the Cowboys win, that's great. That adds an extra win for me. But if the Cowboys lose, it's like, hey, that's another loss for them. Chargers, get themselves back to a winning record. So, and then they got Kansas City next week. So, but I think, but going back to this game, I just wanted to bring that up because rough week in the picks. So if you want to, clip me and put me on freezing cold takes with, talking about the Bucks and how my picks went, go ahead and do that because it was rough. But going back to this game though, it's a big game for Dak Prescott, because that was your worst game of the season so far against the 49ers. You had the bad game against the Cardinals too. I think this has to be a get-right game for you because the Chargers defense not good against the pass. You've been kind of struggling to get the passing game going, and you might have to do that because, let's see how they are against Tony Pollard tonight. I think Pollard will still have a good game, but like I said, the Chargers' run defense is the middle of the pack. So, I think the Cowboys are going to move the ball offensively, but if they don't, against this defense, that's a problem. That's a problem. And then the Cowboys' defense has got to step up. Last week against the Niners, they got shredded. Obviously, the 49ers are a much better team than the Chargers, but that offense has got a lot of playmakers to it. They're missing Mike Williams, but you still got Keenan Allen there. Austin Eckler's back, so that's going to be a problem. And Justin Herbert's playing very good football right now. So, the Cowboys are definitely going to give up some points tonight defensively. So it's going to be up to the offense to try to keep up with this high-powered Chargers offense. And is Dak Prescott going to step up and have a good game? For me, I think the Cowboys should win. But they got to go out. It's easier said than done. You got to go out there and do it. And the Cowboys have some injuries. Actually, we'll look at the let's actually look at the injury update here. So let me go to the game really quickly. Because, the Cowboys, they, dealt with a lot of injuries at the end of the 49ers game. So right now on the Cowboys side of things, so Leighton Vander Esch, he was ruled out with a neck injury. C.J. Goodwin, the pectoral injury, he's out. Juanye Thomas, he's doubtful with a hamstring. So, yeah, that's on the Cowboys side of things. Then on the Chargers side of things, they actually have a decent amount of injuries going into this game. So Joshua Palmer, he's questionable with the groin. Joey Bosa is questionable with the toe. Donald Parham Jr., the tight end, questionable with the wrist. Aloy Gilman, he's doubtful with the heel injury. Dean Leonard, doubtful with the hamstring. Nick Williams, questionable with a back. So some injuries going into this game. But, I think really for the Cowboys, Dak Prescott, don't turn the ball over. Get the ball to CeeDee Lamb. And I think they should win. I think they should. But, again, it's going to be tough. I just hope it's a good game. That's just what I'm hoping for. I mean, this is one of the few, good games from, this week. Because, like I said earlier in the show, I mean, the slate really wasn't that good this week. And obviously I wasn't going to preview, the game last week because, it's being played today. So obviously I was going to do it today. But, yeah, I mean, we'll just see what happens. I mean, especially also because the Eagles lost. So, you win, you gain some ground on them. The Chargers for me, I think they're a wild card team. The Chiefs, they should win this division. So, and obviously the teams, behind them aren't great. Like, still don't trust the Raiders. Broncos are 1-5. So, I think the Chargers should be a playoff team. But, I mean, listen, the head coach, Brandon Staley, obviously they don't make the playoffs, he should be gone. And I keep getting him in, although I didn't say it, but the other night, I was with some friends and I said Joe Staley, the offensive lineman for the Niners. Got to stop doing that. But I didn't do it here, which is good. Brandon Staley still isn't great. The over-aggressive, play calling, I'm just not a fan of. Like, a couple of years ago, it was, it was good and early on, but then it just started getting too much and it's cost them games. And, it's you got to learn when to take the points. And that's something that he still continues to not learn. And also a rumor, and speculation that, like, if he ends up leaving, that maybe Bill Belichick ends up going there. I mean, that would be something. That would be something. I mean, listen, with what's going on over in New England, listen, you can have a different opinion on Belichick and how it's been since Brady left, but I'd take Belichick over Brandon Staley. I mean, he's got although it's obviously things have changed over in New England and it's not looking good right now, but Brandon Staley's not really that good of a coach. And, I think that would be great for Justin Herbert. And that would help. I mean, Belichick going there would help the defense because the defense really hasn't been that good. So, but yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it when it comes to this game. But I wanted to throw that in there because I know there was some talk about that. But, who knows? I mean, the way this Patriots season's going, I mean, Belichick should win out. But we shall see. But, yeah, hopefully this game's good. I'm hoping that, listen, I mean, if the Cowboys win and I could at least, get that game right, that would be nice. Because, again, very rough week in the spreads and predictions. Because, big upsets and just had too much faith in the Bucs. I just thought they would be competitive against the Lions. But Lions are very good, But if the Cowboys can at least salvage this week, maybe I can build some momentum going into next week. So, but yeah, with that is all the time that we have for today for the live portion of this show. So shortly after this, I will record the Patreon. I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe to the video, and enjoy the game tonight. So with that, I am Kenneth Gruenfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day. Enjoy the game tonight, and I will see you guys tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Take care.